You conducted the investigation. Who was responsible?
I don't have that name, sir. I don't remember, to be honest with you.
You don't remember again?
I don't recall. I don't recall. I never said I didn't do anything wrong.
I have not violated any IRS rules or regulations.
I'm not personally responsible.
I will not answer any questions or testify today.
My question isn't about who's going to resign. My question is, who's going to jail over this scandal?
I'm Jay Sekula, Chief Counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice. And about 18 months ago, we were contacted by one conservative organization that was being hassled by the Internal Revenue Service. Their application had been pending at that point for almost 2 years without any response on their tax-exempt status. They were clearly qualified for tax exemption, but the IRS was just not responding.
Fox News alert on a bombshell admission by the Internal Revenue Service. The tax agency is apologizing today for unfairly targeting conservative political groups for additional reviews during the 2012 election. They admit they did it. They admit they did it because you forced them to admit they did it. Tell us how it started.
The IRS asked a series of very intrusive questions, including names of members, information about political positions.
A number of the questions that were asked were not only burdensome, but also in violation of existing law, membership list, donor data.
Send us your Facebook pages, your Twitter pages. And I said, does that include personal pages? And they said everything.
It violated not only statutory law, but constitutional law.
If it is true that there was a knowing effort to target specific conservative organizations, that would be outrageous in the president's view, and there should be consequences.
But all this took place when Lois Lerner and the White House, Jay Carney, the spokesperson, said that all of these activities stopped.
The misconduct had stopped in May of 2012. So despite all the media interest in our April 2013 awareness, it's important to remember that the misconduct, of course, had stopped almost a year earlier.
The letters did not stop. We received a letter from the IRS on May 6, 2013, this very year. Lois Lerner herself signed 15 letters that our clients received with the intrusive questions in them.
I have not done anything wrong.
In fact, Lois Lerner, who took the Fifth Amendment when she was called before Congress to testify, actually signed letters that we received at the ACLJ.
After very careful consideration, I've decided to follow my counsel's advice and not testify or answer any of the questions today.
Lois Lerner today is in charge of tax exempt for the IRS. They are institutionally incapable right now of doing anything. Of course, this comes on the heels of the IRS offering an apology.
That apology not accepted, Jay?
No, it's not accepted because you can say you're sorry all you want, but what they need to say is not only was it wrong and inappropriate, but it was unconstitutional, unlawful, and illegal.
As I'm coming to you today, I filed in the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia this federal lawsuit against the IRS. It's about an inch thick. It names a lot of individuals that were responsible for this. We represent over 25 organizations. We've sued the IRS for discrimination based on viewpoint, for violation of free speech and freedom of association. We've also filed in the same lawsuit allegations that the IRS violated their own procedures and own internal guidelines. The IRS ultimately needs to be held accountable. Here's what we'd like you to do. We've got a petition that's now over 100,000 signatures to stop the abuse of the IRS, to hold the IRS responsible, and frankly to hold the Obama administration responsible for what they've done. You could join with us at aclj.org or call us at 1-877-989-2255. What you just saw speaks for itself. The abuse of the IRS targeting individual citizens, including pro-life Christian organization, has to come to a stop. And that's where we need your help. There's a petition. We encourage you to sign it to end the abuse of the IRS and to abolish the IRS as we know it. aclj.org, or right now you can call 1-877-989-2255. Take a stand for freedom. We're petitioning to abolish the IRS and we're sending it to members of Congress. Join with over 100,000 other people that are doing the same. aclj.org or 1-877-989-2255. Back with more in just a moment.
The scandal inside the Internal Revenue Service gets worse every day. New revelations show a growing scandal involving the IRS intentionally targeting conservative groups since at least 2011. Groups with the words Tea Party or even Patriot in their names were singled out and faced intrusive and intimidating questions that violated their First Amendment rights. What's worse, that abuse is still ongoing. It's time for those inside the Obama administration to be held accountable. Even President Obama has refused to answer specific questions about what he knew and when. The ACLJ has gone to federal court and filed a lawsuit against the IRS on behalf of a number of conservative organizations. Those responsible need to be held accountable. Stand with the ACLJ now. Sign on to our petition to end IRS abuse. Call now, 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255 or online, aclj.org.
Welcome back to the broadcast, everyone. What you're about to hear is actual testimony before the United States Congress by many of our clients in the federal lawsuit that we've initiated against the IRS. You're going to hear their stories in their words, and you're going to see the outrage by members of Congress for what the IRS has done. Again, we want to encourage you to sign that petition at aclj.org or call us at 1-877-989-2255. So it's aclj.org or 877-989-2255 to abolish the IRS as we know it. Take a listen.
My name is Kevin Kookogee, and I am president and founder of Linchpins of Liberty, which is an American leadership development enterprise. Our motto is to challenge the imagination of the rising generation. And we do this by mentoring high school and college students in conservative political philosophy. We aim to mentor high school and college students by teaching them about the great books and about the foundations of America's moral and constitutional order. Linchpins of Liberty is one of those little platoons described by Alex Tocqueville, a local institution intended to act as a check on the power of the state to moderate the despotism of the majority and to give people a taste for freedom and the skills to be free. We are committed to a literary education and moral convictions that will allow citizens to maintain civil order. We aim to develop the moral imagination through the teaching of history, and we believe that God is the measure of all things, and that the soul is the essence of humanity. In order to raise money, I filed an application with the IRS in January of 2011, seeking to obtain 501c3 status as an educational organization. As of today, I've been waiting for 29 months without status. In the interim, I lost a $30,000 launch grant from a reputable nonprofit whose executive director advised me that he had never seen such treatment of a 501c3 applicant in his 25 years of making grants. I also lost and continue to lose multiple thousands of my own money, and I had to cease any further official activity for fear the IRS would target me for further harassment. For 2.5 years, the IRS has unlawfully delayed and obstructed my application for determination of tax-exempt status by using unconstitutional criteria. The types of questions asked by the IRS included asking me to identify the political affiliation of my mentors, and that I advise the IRS of my political position on virtually every issue of importance to me. For good measure, I was asked to identify those whom I train, and that I inform the federal government in detail what I am teaching my students. Considering that the mission of my organization is devoted to mentoring young people, some of whom are minors, can you imagine the reaction of the students' parents were I to turn over the names of their children to the IRS? And to what end? Is it not conceivable that I would be sued? Would the IRS threaten to audit the parents of those students? Yet my failure to comply with this stunning inquiry would result in the denial of my application or subject me to perjury.
My name is Diane Belsom. I am the president of Lawrence County Tea Party. Lawrence County Tea Party is a social welfare organization that seeks to educate ourselves and our fellow citizens on various issues pertinent to living in a free country. And we also work to educate voters by vetting candidates and holding candidate forums during election years. We typically meet once a month and hold an annual rally. We held our first Tax Day Tea Party rally in April of 2009, and then formally organized and incorporated with the state of South Carolina in March of 2010. On July 22, 2010, we filed for 501c4 status with the IRS and paid the application fee of $400. We received a letter on August 11, 2010, stating that if more information was needed to process our application, we would be contacted within approximately 90 days. After hearing nothing, I called the IRS in the summer of 2011, which is a year after I filed, and was told our case was still pending. But in the meantime, we were still responsible for filing tax returns, which we have done. Nothing more was heard until September 6, 2012, when we received a communication from the IRS requesting extremely burdensome additional information, which includes the following. Provide a copy of our Articles of Incorporation, which we had sent with our initial application in 2010. Information about all of our committees, including legislative, educational, and vetting, and how much time and resources are devoted to these activities. They sent about 20 pages copied from our website and wanted confirmation that these were, in fact, from our website. Then they wanted samples from any other social media sites, including Facebook. They asked for detailed information about all meetings, rallies, and events with dates and names of speakers, agendas, any associated materials, and if a guest speaker made remarks concerning upcoming elections and whether our organization took a view on anything expressed, and how much time or resources are devoted to these activities. I'd like to note that our group is a small-time operation with very little money, and this represents a complete waste of time by the IRS in terms of any money they would collect if we were not tax exempt. Furthermore, nearly 3 years in waiting for an answer is totally unacceptable. The IRS needs to be fully investigated and held accountable for its incompetence, harassment, and targeting of conservative groups. Thank you.
In October 2010, the San Fernando Valley Patriots, a not-for-profit corporation in California, applied with the Internal Revenue Service for a 501c4 status as a tax-exempt social welfare organization. We were then and remain a Tea Party group affiliated with the National Tea Party Patriots. We heard nothing until February 2012, when I received a packet from the IRS Exempt Organizations Office in Cincinnati, Ohio, which included a questionnaire with 35 items divided into 80 subpoints of inquiry. A cover letter indicated that we had 20 days to comply without penalty, including penalties of perjury, for failure to answer all questions with facts that are true, correct, and complete. Generally, the questions were a demand that read like the chilling words from the 1950s, "Are you now or have you ever been?" The IRS sought identifying information on employees, data on volunteers and members, plus employer identification numbers on businesses with which we associate. These are our donors. They have names. Mike, the printer, who gave us a discount on handbills. Dee, the beauty consultant, who donated posters for our tax day rallies. And Greg, the electrician, who made a stand for our 9/11 banner out of pipes and wires. The IRS sought details of communications with our legislators. Even in Southern California, that is protected free speech. My personal favorite was question number 33, which in relation to protests asked for a listing of our, quote, committed violations of local ordinances, breaches of public order or arrests, then requested details on how we conduct or promote illegal activities. I think the IRS needs to fix its labeling machine. We're the San Fernando Valley Patriots, not Occupy Oakland. I stopped the costly and exhausting IRS process in July 2012. We survive on my credit card and donations in our cake tin. Like patriots before us, we persevere.
But just a few months later, in January 2009, we learned that our government was going to spend another $787 billion. That money went to foreign nations, failing banks, and unproductive industries. We were worried, and we knew we had to do something to sound the alarm. And that was the birth of the Wetumpka Tea Party. There are no dues, no price for membership. Our events are mostly educational. Whatever expenses are incurred are paid from donations, by donations and T-shirt sales. In Wetumpka, we are patriotic Americans. We peacefully assemble. We petition our government. We exercise the right to free speech, and we don't understand why the government tried to stop us. I'm not here as a serf or a vassal. I'm not begging my lords for mercy. I'm a born-free American woman, wife, mother, and citizen, and I'm telling my government that you've forgotten your place. It's not your responsibility to look out for my well-being and to monitor my speech. It's not your right to assert an agenda. Your post, the post that you occupy, exists to preserve American liberty. You've sworn to perform that duty, and you have faltered. The abuses I will discuss today occurred on your watch, and it's your responsibility to make sure it doesn't happen again. We applied for a 501c4 in October 2010. Our $850 application fee was cashed 7 days later. We received a letter from Robert Cho dated November 2nd, 2010, stating that our application and our user fee payment had been received. It also stated that we should be expecting to hear from someone within 90 days. However, the IRS did not initiate any contact with us for another 459 days. That was when I received a letter from the Cincinnati office dated February 3rd, 2012. That letter stated that they could not process our application until we completed the enclosed questionnaire, which requested approximately 90 pieces of additional information about our organization. The questionnaire stated that if the additional information was not returned by February 24th, our case would be closed. The demands for information in the questionnaire shocked me as someone who loves liberty and the First Amendment. I was asked to hand over my donor list, including the amounts that they gave and the dates on which they gave them. 501c4 organizations do not have to disclose donor information. I knew that. Why don't they? They wanted me to identify all of my volunteers. They wanted to know if any of our donors or volunteers had run or would be running for office in the near future. Remember, this was the 2012 election cycle. They wanted us to identify the office they would be running for. They wanted us to provide detailed contents of all speeches ever given, the names of our speakers and their credentials. They wanted copies of written communications and contents of all other forms of communications to any legislative body, including my own representative. I was very uncomfortable with these questions, as you can imagine, and my husband and I discussed forfeiting our application. However, within days of reading through these questions, we knew we were being targeted because fellow Tea Party organizers across this nation were getting the same types of letters and questionnaires. That was when we decided to seek legal counsel. On March 6, 2012, we retained the counsel of the American Center for Law and Justice, and they represented us in this matter. 2 weeks later, I received a letter from Lois Lerner, dated March 16, 2012, asking that I provide the previously requested information. 4 months later, we received a letter dated July 9, 2012, stating that we had been approved to receive our tax exemption. This was 635 days after we applied.
We're going to have more from the United States Congress when we come back from the break, but I want to encourage you to take direct action. And you could do that by signing the petition to abolish the IRS. You've seen the abuse, you've heard the abuse. Call us at 1-877-989-2255. Join with over 120,000 other people that are doing exactly that. Stop the abuse of the IRS, abolish the IRS as we know it. ACLJ.org or 1-877-989-2255. It's ACLJ.org or 877-989-2255. Back with more.
The scandal inside the Internal Revenue Service gets worse every day. New revelations show a growing scandal involving the IRS intentionally targeting conservative groups since at least 2011. Groups with the words Tea Party or even Patriot in their names were singled out and faced intrusive and intimidating questions that violated their First Amendment rights. What's worse, that abuse is still ongoing. It's time for those inside the Obama administration to be held accountable. Even President Obama has refused to answer specific questions about what he knew and when. The ACLJ has gone to federal court and filed a lawsuit against the IRS on behalf of a number of conservative organizations. Those responsible need to be held accountable. Stand with the ACLJ now. Sign on to our petition to end IRS abuse. Call now, 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255 or online, aclj.org.
Welcome back to the broadcast, everyone. In the previous segment of our broadcast, you heard from our clients who've been targeted by the IRS. We're representing them now in federal court. But they were not the only ones upset about what the IRS was doing. Now you're going to hear from members of the United States Congress, Republican and Democrats. Take a listen.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome to Washington. The committee will be in order. Ryan has the time.
We heard Gingrich, we heard Bush.
Mr. Chairman.
We had the former IRS Commissioner Schulman, who knew about the political targeting long before Congress was told, since implied that the organizations were responsible for the targeting because they chose to apply for tax-exempt status. So you're to blame, I guess, is the message here. Do you think that you were targeted based upon your political beliefs, your religious beliefs, or just because you chose to apply?
Our beliefs, our views.
We had the acting Commissioner Miller here a couple of weeks ago, and we asked him, did groups with the word organizing or progressive in their name, were they targeted? The answer was no. We do know, this is one of the facts we now know, people were singled out because of their beliefs. Back to my original line here. Mr. Kokagi, thank you, sorry.
It's okay.
You're 29 months?
29 months and counting.
And counting. You haven't been approved yet.
I've not been approved.
You've been asked, one of your inquiries, 90 questions, asking you to provide a list of your members and donors, the political affiliation of your mentors, and your political position on virtually every issue important to you.
Yes, sir.
You're teaching Montesquieu, Cicero, Augustine, de Tocqueville, Washington, and it's 29 months in waiting, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Mr. Eastman, I just want to get this one nailed down. Dr. Eastman, excuse me. You have proof that the IRS, an individual or a group of individuals at the IRS committed a felony. You have proof to this, and nothing has occurred to seek or find justice. Is that correct?
That's correct. Federal law requires that we be notified if there's an indictment brought. We have not been. Federal law allows us to request information about what the status of the investigation, whether it's been productive or unproductive, and any action taken. We were refused to respond any answer to that request as well. We have identified that this document came from within the IRS.
So your donors are confidential. That's protected by law. You have proof that the IRS leaked your confidential donor information to a group that opposes your point of view, and your donors were harassed as a result of that. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right, Ms. Martinick, right next door in Iowa. I work with groups very similar to what you do in Iowa. Your board members, the IRS told you that if your board signed a letter saying that they would no longer picket or protest on behalf of the pro-life movement at Planned Parenthood, that then they could receive their tax-exempt status. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So surrender your First Amendment rights, and then we might approve your application.
That is correct. She said it was ready to go through. Everything was in order, and as soon as they received that letter, the application would go through.
We have not heard any testimony that this is happening to groups that have the opposite views. So to suggest that these citizens are to blame for applying, I don't understand how one can make that conclusion.
And continuing the coverage now, as political targets who say they were singled out for scrutiny by the IRS are getting their say now on Capitol Hill. Good morning, I'm John Scott.
We're all hearing an important part of the story together today. Hi, everybody. I'm Jenna Lee, and some new details and the IRS scandal being revealed right now at a hearing before the House Ways and Means Committee. They're everyday Americans who want to add their voices now to this big political conversation, and they say they were targeted by the IRS for the wrong reasons. Today, they're sharing stories of intimidation and they say discrimination as lawmakers attempt to uncover the truth about why they were singled out and who exactly gave those orders. One witness voicing grave concern about all IRS requests for intrusive information.
I was asked to identify those whom I train and that I inform the federal government in detail what I am teaching my students. Considering that the mission of my organization is devoted to mentoring young people, some of whom are minors, can you imagine the reaction of the students' parents were I to turn over the names of their children to the IRS?
Well, back now to a live look at the hearings. The question and answer session just getting underway now. Here's one of the witnesses today. Let's take a listen.
Now that I think about it, I was looking back through, I mean, this is the paperwork, my file. And when I look back through all this information that's been sent into the IRS, and I've heard about these, 157 visits, I believe it was, between the head of the IRS and President Obama, and I'm very concerned. It just makes me very nervous about, was my group being discussed? Was our political activities being discussed? And are we somehow targeted for this? And it's very chilling.
All right. Mr. Kookogee.
Most disturbing to linchpins of liberty, keep in mind that we work with students, some of them minors, 7th graders, that the IRS would ask to know the identity of those students is unbelievably, unconscionably chilling.
At the same hearing that I mentioned earlier on May 17th, then Acting Commissioner Steve Miller summed up the IRS's action as horrible customer service. Now, I know that I certainly take a different view of that, as I'm sure many members of this committee do. And his quote was, "I will admit that we did horrible customer service. Whether it was politically motivated or not is a different question." I would say, Dr. Eastman, if you had a bank and you disclosed confidential customer information, would you call that horrible customer service, or would you call that something else?
I would call it a felony, as the federal law calls this a felony.
All right.
And I would hold the people that committed those felonies accountable. I would bring indictments. I would open up civil liability for them, for the taxpayers that were affected. The damages to our donor base are incalculable, and I would prosecute those people responsible.
All right, thank you.
That's going to do it for the broadcast today, but the cases are far from over. We need your help. We are petitioning for radical change in Washington, D.C. We want to change the tax code and abolish the IRS as we know it. We need your help in that regard. You can sign our petition at aclj.org. That's aclj.org, or simply call us at 1-877-989-2255. aclj.org or 877-989-2255.
The scandal inside the Internal Revenue Service gets worse every day. New revelations show a growing scandal involving the IRS intentionally targeting conservative groups since at least 2011. Groups with the words Tea Party or even Patriot in their names were singled out and faced intrusive and intimidating questions that violated their First Amendment rights. What's worse, that abuse is still ongoing. It's time for those inside the Obama administration to be held accountable. Even President Obama has refused to answer specific questions about what he knew and when. The ACLJ has gone to federal court and filed a lawsuit against the IRS on behalf of a number of conservative organizations. Those responsible need to be held accountable. Stand with the ACLJ now. Sign on to our petition to end IRS abuse. Call now, 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255 or online, aclj.org.